welcome back to another episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through a story coming from National Review about how we rebuild our military industrial base. And that is to say, how we supply our arsenal, how we build new equipment, how we innovate, so on and so forth. We're going to be experimenting in the world of hypotheticals today, because I don't necessarily think that we should spend all of our money on this, though we can't deny that it is important, especially when we're arming allies. So with that, let's jump into our daily delight. This one is more, how should I say, future-oriented. Are we losing the capacity that we need to survive as a nation? It excludes sending it to other places. Do we have enough to support ourselves? This is a question of material and actual quantification, because you could look at how long we could go to war. But my question to you is, do you feel it's adequate? The amount of supply that we have, or at least the ability to gin up enough of that supply in order to meet our needs. I'm sure I'll have many different arguments from many different people. I have people from the left that listen to this that would probably say, no, no, no. Populists who say a little bit, and some hawks that would say, oh, yes, 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 we definitely need to have more. So with that said, let's jump into the article from National Review, like I said. And the headline on this one reads, America's Arsenal of Democracy Needs a Reboot. That is a really poetic way of saying that we need to be able to arm ourselves. So when we have this conversation, I think it's actually really important, since we're living in the world of hypotheticals today, to also take it in tandem, this argument in tandem, with the reshoring of American jobs. And you would say, whoa, Alex, what do you mean? So let's set up this hypothetical by excusing the fact that the current tariff regime is actually not going to bring back American jobs, at least not as many as people would hope. So let's excuse that and live in a world of perfects, so to speak, which is we are bringing back American jobs. We're building out the capacity to do that. Companies are building out the capacity to do that. And we are in a world where we need to furnish our industrial base for our military operations. So I think there is actually a tandem here, which is, we'll go through what the article proposes, but I want you to focus on how they talk about ginning up this industrial base through small companies, through small manufacturing operations. I think that is extremely important, but my question could be, why can't it be the opposite? Why can't these military installations, these military manufacturers be spun up in order to build out the capacity we need to get to the point where we actually break even nowadays, and then possibly transition to a commercial use? We'll go through what their argument is, and then I'll explain why I think there is a model for this that could very well work. So with that, let's go to the second paragraph to describe the current situation. Quote, the cache of American weapons supplied to Ukraine and Israel has been consumed at such a rapid rate that commanders are raising alarms. Admiral Paparo, head of the United States Indo-Pacific Command, warned, quote, is now eating into stocks, and to say otherwise would be dishonest. Paparo's concern isn't theoretical. In the event of an invasion of Taiwan, which China has long characterized as inevitable, America's ability to sustain a defense against the PLA is uncertain. So we've done these sort of studies before. If we were to go to war, what would we have to do in order to not be completely devoid of weapons, materials, missiles, things of this nature within a short period of time? And the scale up is absolutely massive. The preparation beforehand is also extremely necessary. So let's go to this paragraph where they start to actually describe what we have to do in order to reach this place. Remember, this is all opinions of National Review, and whether or not you like what they're saying, they're at least trying to make a coherent argument for preparing us and our industrial base to supply allies for their wars. Quote, the key to rapidly expanding our manufacturing capability lies with small and medium-sized commercial manufacturers that are not currently part of the defense industrial base. Over 98% of the 244,000 manufacturers in the United States employ fewer than 500 workers. Around 2/3 of the 13 million men and women employed in manufacturing work for these similar companies. entrepreneurial mid-market manufacturers constitute the majority of the nation's production capacity, and most of these businesses are not in the traditional defense industry base. We must identify these companies, categorize their capabilities, and incentivize them to participate in the national manufacturing mission, end quote. And there's something to that, which is we use what we have already in order to get spare parts, to make even small pieces of different complex machines and then ship them around the United States. We provide some sort of extra grant funding in order to make sure that they can tool these machines, they can tool these parts, or that they can build out automation to do so in order to keep the prices cheap. Though, of course, it is all American labor, which for most of our defense industry, it probably should be. There should be very few parts that are coming from China simply because we don't want China or any other producer to be able to cut it off in a time of war. But on the other fact that we want to make sure that we are absolutely positive there are no purposeful defects, bugs, so on and so forth. So having it in the United States makes sense. But remember at the beginning, or not that long ago, only 3 minutes ago, I mentioned that there's another possibility, which is this. Most Americans are okay with government subsidizing the military, mainly because the military is a branch of the government, and it is also one of the highest, most trusted branches of the government. And I say branch, not in the official capacity, one of the auxiliaries of the government. It is one of the most trusted. It has some of the highest approval ratings. So though you can always argue about lowering military spending, and plenty of people do, at least when it comes to the acceptable amount of spending, a lot of people are on board with that, especially when you make a national security argument. And it is also the simplest way to actually spend into this place while having a justification that also can lead to what I spoke about in the second part of this earlier, saying that we can build out small business or commercial manufacturing. You think, Alex, how do you do this? Well, we live in an age where modular technology, and we talked about this in a previous episode about a new drone was being made by a 17-year-old. We've talked about this in very different capacities. There's also a new naval company, I believe it's called Insola. I'm sorry if I'm not getting that exactly correct, that wants to build modular factories essentially for their modular boats that can be a drone fleet deployed anywhere around the world. And when you're funding this for a military basis, once again, we're living in a hypothetical here because any extra funding has to be highly scrutinized. But when you're building for a military capacity and you create modular systems, factories that are truly modular in nature. So whether that be allowing for different types of machines to be able to plug in / connect to the different manufacturing belts that you are creating there, that you can have expandable or decreasable, rearrangeable line sets, very simple things like this, everything on a track, and have it easily adjustable in order to complement different workflows. Having these sort of small changeable machines and having them be modular allows you to, after a certain amount of time, whether it is to the point where you reach the supply that you need for these different things, it allows, or whether it be simply as you get to a part where you're tooling things out and you decide we can consolidate some of these processes. We use this time in order to prototype and everything of this sort, and we've built up to the capacity we need right now. You can lease it, lend it back out to commercial businesses at a discounted rate, at a normal rate, whatever it may be, and with most of the materials there and the capability to upgrade the materials and production equipment, you actually provide a avenue to bring small businesses and medium businesses, and even in some cases, if the modular factory is large enough, big businesses back into the United States. Now, of course, there are much more technicalities here that I can't simply say I know absolutely everything. But in a world where we are constantly worried about flexibility, adaptability, and being able to rapidly adapt to any change, why can't we apply that same methodology, the lean, some version of the lean / equipment ready methodology into our production ready methodology into our factories that we are building out for national security purposes? How long do national security locations last forever. Boeing has a lot of different production locations, Raytheon. I'm not trying to say that these companies will magically give up their factories if they are part of this new program, or simply that the government will give up on these factories after a certain amount of time. I'm sure there will be sprawling amounts of spending on keeping these alive. But imagine being able to spin these up in certain locations close to the manufacturers in this case that you actually want to bring in, these small businesses. You give them a contract, you spin up a manufacturing location nearby where they can use a product, and then guess what? You help them innovate, and then if they want to stop producing, if they find a new supplier, that factory could still be used rather than being dead space and dead weight by other incumbents because it is modular in nature. I think, though, this is I would say it's naive of me to simply believe that we can go about our business as a military and we can hire out and contract out and then simply replace everything when we want a new company to come in and take over. I would not dismiss it out of hand, especially because certain companies are intentionally building their locations and factories just like this to be interchangeable, to allow for flexibility. And therefore, if the government's going to already invest in building out this industrial base, why not make sure that while you're doing it, maybe a little bit more expensive, but that it can be future-proofed? This is a word that you hear all the time. This can be future-proofed in order to benefit the American manufacturing long term, even if that means that it's a little bit more heavily focused on robotics rather than on manual labor. So, with all that said, if you want to check out the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, all the links will be in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also down there you can find the podcast on the channel on Rumble. And if you want to keep up to date, I send out links on the Twitter account, which is at Your Daily Flip, where these links come out on Monday, Wednesday, Friday for these podcasts, as well as the 6 and 6 podcast, 6 stories from around the world in 6 minutes or less. And those come out on Tuesday and Thursday at the same time at noon. So, with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe, don't die.